Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Jameelah, and I am a master manifester, and I'm sure you are too, because you're watching content like this. The name of this channel is Holistic Manifesting, because I believe in a whole body, whole mind, and whole being experience when it comes to manifesting the amazing lives that we're choosing. What I'm discussing today is a kind of a touchy subject for me in a sense, not necessarily touchy anymore in my life, but for a time, this was something that I focused a lot of energy and attention on and found a lot of healing as it related to this topic. And I had to meditate on it today because whenever I bring topics or subjects to the forefront, I always want to make sure that I'm doing it in the right spirit, with the right mindset, and I'm not doing it to just complain about something, but I'm doing it to more so inform others and to sort of possibly assist in breaking generational curses for other people, for myself, because sometimes when I discuss the information, new ideas pop up, right? So I say all that to say that, you may ask me about this stuff a year from now, and the outcome may change, right? You never know. But this is something that I've gathered over the years and paying close attention to what is it that creates these certain outcomes when it comes to women that around me and, myself and women that I've been connected to at different times in their life. And so, ways in which, and this is not like a blaming session of mothers because I'm a mother and I'm a mother of daughters. So this is just a way that we can kind of see like, okay, this is something that I might want to pay attention to. This is something that I might want to pay attention to that I don't want to do, that I don't want to engage in, that I don't want to give the wrong impression about. Because sometimes I think we just don't know, right? Ways in which mothers, I'll say, negatively impact their daughter's self-worth or their daughter's value or their daughter's self-esteem, right? Something that I've seen a lot, and this is just in different environments everywhere I've been, is mothers don't often tell daughters that they're smart and that they're beautiful. I think sometimes that we have this ego that works inside of us that says that I'm the mother, I'm supposed to be the smartest and the greatest and the best and the most beautiful and the most this and whatever. And so we have a daughter who's coming up and they have that youthful beauty, which we know is different than age beauty, which both are very beautiful, but there's a difference in society with it, right? A lot of women can get intimidated. A lot of mothers get, negative feelings about it because they feel like this is not even true. They feel like just as their beauty and their, careers and all that are waning, that, their daughters is just beginning. And so sometimes instead of embracing that time frame for their daughters and, giving them the positive reinforcement that would help them continue to grow and expand, they hold back. And I think that a lot of women don't even have the ability to say those things, that you're beautiful and you're smart, because they don't necessarily feel it for themselves. And they haven't come from an environment either where anybody said it to them. And of course, like everything I'm going to mention on this list, the only way to combat these things is to have some type of intense therapy, spiritual awakenings, do some self introspection. And that's pretty much how these things are solved over time, right? Another one is that I've seen is they overvalue their sons and treat their daughters as if they're a problem to be solved. And I don't know if this goes back to historical times, which I think it kind of does generationally, where men were seen as a lot more valuable to a household because they could actually earn money because, women were limited in their ability to earn. So it's kind of like a problem created by society by not allowing women to earn money. But then in the household, it made men more superior because they could earn money. So however you want to look at that, but I feel like that's what it stems from, just a historical outcome of just a hunter-gatherer mindset, which I'm sure worked for a time and still works to some degree for a lot of people, and where men's labor was a lot more valuable. And I still think that physical labor is a lot more valuable in our society. Outside physical labor, because I think women's physical labor inside the household is formidable. So that's not what I want to put across in any kind of way. I think that in these situations where you have that environment where the boys are prized and the girls are treated like a problem, or like they're in the way, or like, they're, don't go out there and get pregnant. I think we all know that, because the majority of the time, if there's a teen pregnancy, the girl is still going to be raising that child, and it's going to be then a problem for the family to solve. So that's kind of where that stuff stems from. With the young man, it's a little bit different because, well, rarely does he carry the baby back to the home of a family. It happens, but women carry those babies back home a lot sooner. Like my dad, I used to tell him as a joke, men get a 9-month head start on on a baby. So it's kind of different in those sense. I can see where that might stem from generationally. I try to make sense of these things and not try to retrofit the way that we think and operate today on the way that things were in the past. I do my best at that. I'm not perfect at it, but I try to do my best. What I notice is that it creates very poor character in men. It makes them not accountable for being like sexually disciplined, for like, creating a decent family and a household where they are relied upon and valued in a certain way. They're able to kind of get away with a lot of things because just them being a man and their male presence is enough for the mother, and she's just happy with that. And so that's something that I've seen. With women, of course, in these environments, it creates a lot of low self-esteem and low self-value and low self-worth, because you're essentially being told, because you were born of one gender and not another, you've already fallen behind. You've already got, negative strikes on you to some extent. Another thing that mothers may do sometimes to sort of negatively impact their daughter's self-esteem and self-worth is they prioritize men over their children's well-being. So a lot of people talk about this when they grew up in households, how their mother would have them, move from place to place to place or something like that, kind of like in survival mode. And when I think historically, what that might have come from, just the same entire idea of women not being able to earn. So therefore, they had to be attached to men. I think it was 1976 when women were able to get credit cards and checkbooks, checking accounts in their own names. 1976. That's very recent to me because I was born only a few years after that. And so in that mindset, it's kind of like I have to be attached to a man in order to make value of my life. So like I said before, I try to see it from the historical perspectives rather than trying to retrofit today what the rules are and how we play the game today, because it's just not the same, right? But that sometimes can be overkill. Me and my daughter was watching a video, and there was a woman saying, she was 70. So she was saying when she was 18 years old, her dad threw her stuff out in the sidewalk and said it's time for her to make a way for herself, right? And I was telling her how that was a lot of the way that the old school mindset was, right? That's why people say you got 18 years. And the modern thing now is that like, well, kids are your kids forever. They're not gonna, that's a new thing, because even when I was growing up, I had to figure out my life at 18 years old. I had my first apartment when I was 18 years old, and I didn't necessarily have parents to go live with at 18 years old either way, because they were just doing their own thing. And so I think that we minimize that mindset when it comes to how that affects the children's well-being and how that affects their, if you see like a woman go to bat heavily for a man, but they don't go to bat heavily for like that for their children, then that throws especially a daughter off into thinking like, well, I don't have any value unless I was attached to a marriage or relationship or something like that, right? I think also too, that might be where a lot of early mothers and teen moms came from back in the day too, because it gave you another value besides just being another girl. You could be a mother. And if you were a mother, that was some kind of a little bit more value than just being yourself, right? And a lot of women from that era, just a man existing is more than enough. You know what I mean? It's like, a man is more than enough. And this is not to minimize or belittle or anything, men in any kind of way. But I can clearly see the contrast because I watch older generations and then I watch the way my daughters move. And I will learn a lot from them because I leave the door wide open to learn from them, because they're seeing the world in a very different way than I did. And some things that I know does not work for me, I look at how they manage it and how they think through it. And I'm like, they don't even consider, like they don't even second guess Now, mind you, I might do a little, pat on my own back for raising them in a mindset of being um, their own hero, their own value to some degree. But it doesn't mean that they don't date and have boyfriends and all that kind of stuff, because they do. And so it doesn't change that sort of thing. It's just they move very differently than I was growing up. It's very fun to watch, and it teaches me a lot too, right? And I'm glad that they never got a message of not having value because of that. They act as if every man that I had to read these notes because this is funny. A lot of mothers, they'll act as if every man that their daughter dates or that they marry are doing their daughters a favor. So I feel like that's also an old school mindset, right? Because take her off our hands. She's only a burden, right? And that's kind of the same mindset. I don't even think they know why they do these things. It's just like, oh, I hope that she works it out. I hope she acts right. I got a message very early on when I was like 16 years old, when I had my first boyfriend who I dated for many years. And I remember being told that I don't see how he puts up with you. And I was like, the same way I put up with him. But it's like, if there was no space for that, right? And so it reminded me that how you were always in the spaces I was in, you were always seen as like somebody putting up with you, or somebody, doing the hard work of dragging you around, or putting up with your emotions or your mindset or whatever it was, right? And so it kind of gives off that energy of like somebody's always doing their daughters a favor if they're dating them. It's like, dang, what am I, chopped liver? And it gives you a mindset like you're chopped liver. It's not that you believe it. It's just that whenever things go a certain way or people treat you a certain way, a part of you is just like, wait, this is the message I got, when I was a kid, that, I'm the problem. I should be better. Otherwise, nobody's going to want me. That's just the mindset. And it's like, I'm so grateful for the breaking of generational curses. And I'm so grateful for the ability to learn and grow and expand and be. Because when I tell you, a lot of messages that I grew up on, and this isn't nobody's fault in particular, this was just a way of how society was in a lot of environments. If you weren't on the leading edge, you were right in the middle of these things. That it was a little bit rough, but I also feel like it was rougher before me too. So I don't get it twisted. I can see it generationally. It's like I'm a good observer. I like to observe things, and I observe my daughters. I observe millennials. I observe Gen Z. I see how it moves and the impact of how families impact the way women feel about themselves. And I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense, right? And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Then you can't fall for it anymore, right? So yeah, stop making daughters feel like somebody's doing them a favor. Another thing is, they also do this too, and everybody knows this, and a lot of people have talked about this on many YouTube channels. They treat their daughters as if their life is incomplete because they're not married or they don't have a man or something like that. So it doesn't matter, and I've seen Shonda Rhimes complain about this, what you accomplish, what you do, how good you feel about yourself, what you created in the world, how many people you've helped, how beautiful the children are that you've raised, how many vacations you've been on, how many world traveling events, how many, third world countries you visited and fed the poor and made clothing and, did rescue at Hurricane Harvey and all these sort of things. The first thing people are going to go look and say is, does she have a man? It's like, that's an old school way of thinking. I can honestly say my daughters do not think like that. It doesn't even cross their mind. And I love that for them. They're like, oh, wow, she's impressive. And that's the end of the conversation. They don't even go on. They have friends that they're inspired by, people that they're impressed with, and they never go, let me see if she has a man. It's like, why? And that's not to say there's anything wrong with that. Being married and being in good relationships is a wonderful thing. But if it's not what you're doing at that time in your life, you shouldn't be dinged for it. You shouldn't be dinged for it. And your life can feel very complete without that stuff. That's like the same way of telling people they're incomplete if they don't have children. Some women can't have children. Some women don't want children. And I think we can all clearly see why they don't want them. Stop badgering women about not wanting children. You already know why they don't want them. Children are beautiful after you have them and you see what it's like and you experience it and there's a wonderment to it and you have rough days and you have amazing days and you wouldn't change it for the world. But to tell someone who's never breached that, they're like, you sure want to have, they're not, they can see a lot of things about it that's not appealing, and I can perfectly see why. So it's like telling them their life is somehow, not complete. It's like a life is a life is a life is a life. We all come here and we all go away. There's nothing we're going to hold on to and take to our grave and take to the next world or whatever you think is going to happen after this. There's nothing like that that's going to happen. People may or may not talk about you after you go, and you may have accomplished a million things and it may not mean anything at all. You may have had a husband and a bunch of kids and they may not even notice you exist when you leave. You may be replaced a year after you're deceased, and the children may treat the new woman like that's the best mom in the world. So it's like, you live a life and you live a life and you live this life to its completion and its best. You're already whole when you show up here. You're already whole when you show up on earth. There's nothing that this world can give you that makes you more whole. It doesn't even work that way. Everything that you are spiritually awakening about and expanding about, it was already inside of you. It was already a value inside of you. You just learned how to pull it out. So that's why I say everybody is everything. Whenever people go around saying, oh, my son wouldn't do this, oh, my daughter wouldn't do that, and I'm like, you don't know what they would do. Everything is in everybody. And I'm not saying that everybody has wickedness or something like that in them, but this world doesn't give us anything. We just take the things out of us and express it into the world and share it at different times. Everything that we need and what we are is already in us. The only thing that makes us think differently is this type of information I'm sharing right here that says, you're less than because you don't have this. You're less than because you don't have a car. You're less than because you don't own a house. You're less than because you can't take vacations. You're less than because you don't have a husband. And it's just not true. Believe me, I've been married, I've been not. I've been in relationships and I've been not. And I can honestly tell you, some of my happiest times are just being myself. Being by myself, with myself. And I'm not saying I didn't have happy times with other people, but none of it was negative, right? None of it was negative. Nonetheless, the last thing I have here is they don't fully acknowledge when a man or a husband or father is treating the daughters with disrespect or like negatively. And I've had this happen. I've had this happen in my own life. People, I've mentioned this before, but the ex-husband is not a super, I wouldn't say super, I'm being honest, not involved. But every now and then would show up and do things, the same old broken record that everybody talks about or whatever. It's just that these young girls are smarter these days. So it's like you can't pull that wool over them. And they're just like, oh, this is love and appreciation. They're checking you just like they're checking the people they're dating. They're not letting anybody slide with poor behavior or inconsistency and all that. And this person would do the simplest things and they'd be like, oh, look how much he loves his daughter. When I show love, it's getting up in the morning, taking these kids to school. It's saying prayers with them at night. It's reading them stories. It's homeschooling them. It's making sure they take one vacation a year somewhere, even if it's just to a beach that's an hour away. It's making sure they have proper nutrition. It's cooking meals on a daily basis, right? It's getting proper clothing, proper jackets, proper shoes, everything they need to have the right clothes on their back. It's making sure they have mattresses that don't give them backaches, right? It's making sure they have their own space. It's making sure they have girl products and everything they need for that. It's making sure that they get to their extracurricular activities, making sure they have a life, making sure their fees are paid for school, making sure their fees are paid so they can go to these events that they have to do, making sure they get music lessons, making sure they go to art school, making sure they play soccer, making sure they go to ballet, making sure they go to dance. I can go on forever. To me, that's love, because that's an intentional approach to it. But somebody walking around and throwing a kid up in the air and giving them a hug, and your own people is like, oh, that's how much he loved it. That can really make a woman in her work feels devalued, right? And I think mothers are the most perpetrators of this because we spend the most time with them. They're most often the biggest influence that we have in our lives. And whether we want to admit it or not, they're the primary caretakers of us, even when we have the father in the home, right? They're still the primary caretakers. And a lot of times, what I'm noticing now, because I was of the same mindset, is like, oh, my daughters are going to be, the dad's not in the home. I got a divorce. What is it going to be? Blah, blah, blah. And what I realized is that they're way more well-rounded than what I was. And I had a father in the home my whole entire life, till I was 18 years old. And so I think that we have to start paying more attention to the quality of people and stop just putting people on pedestals because, we can, and stop minimizing, right? And I think when we raise these better daughters, and I'm not talking about girls that are full of pride, girls that are full of, what is it called? That are haughty and these sort of things. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about well-rounded, solid people who can be productive in society, who can bring something to society, who has an ability to create a life for themselves and valued. Because this is what I find. Everybody will devalue you and what you're doing until they need money, until they need to borrow something. And it's just a fact. It's like, oh, women money is just as good as men money, right? Let me not get messy. But what I'm saying is that we have to start raising our daughters to have better self-esteem and better self-worth. We wonder why we come out of the house choosing poorly, choosing men poorly, choosing relationships poorly. And this is not to look at your own mother and go, oh, you did me wrong. It's not even about that. It's about that's done, what's done is done, and doing better for the next generations, right? Not perpetuating those same mindsets. And I recently had an incident and not an incident, but it was some words, a family member said to one of my daughters, and she was like, soon as we left, she was like, that is so archaic. I didn't even notice. So that lets me know that they're learning even without me even being able to touch all the little pieces of what's nonsense and what's something that they should be focused on and things that they shouldn't be focused on, right? And I love it. I love that for them because I know that they'll have a healthier mindset. I can even see now in the way they choose their friends, the way they choose their boyfriends, the way they choose relationships of all sorts, the way they interact with people who aren't consistent and don't show up for them and who don't reciprocate. I was not like that. I was always just, it's my fault. I'm a giver. It's my fault. I have to be at the bottom of the barrel. People they tease you, they pick on you. Oh, it's just family. It's okay. That was the mindset that I had. And I love that that is not something they have, but I can honestly say I was intentional about a lot of things. And the rest of the way that they've gone has truly been on their own merit and just having a good foundation, right? So this was a video about just ways in which I see that mothers can generationally harm their daughters' self-worth and self-esteem. We have to be telling our daughters, we have to be treating them like as if their presence, what they have done and who they are is enough, and it's more than enough, right? We can't be acting like it's like, oh, there's no husbands, there's no support, Hey man, that path is not always for everybody, and that's okay. It can't be for everybody. It never has been. So there's no difference to that, We have to just make sure that if we don't want daughters to go, okay, well, let me go make children without having a stable foundation. Well, that doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from believing that somehow you have to give yourself, or somehow you owe somebody something, or somehow people should have access to your body because they're buying you gifts or something like that. That comes from a very deep-rooted sense of not being valued and not having esteem and not being enough, right? And we can outgrow it. We can become better, we can expand, we can grow, we can have a good mindset about ourselves, we can value ourselves. And then once you see the insecurities that lie within that type of mindset, you can't unsee it. And when you can't unsee it, you're able to create a better life for yourself and a better life for your own children and in particularly for this video, a better life for your daughters. And I can honestly say I don't have sons, but I'm thinking that it probably is a good impact on sons also too, right? Anyway, I think that's all I got to ramble on this subject, right? Don't come at me for saying the wrong thing. I'm a work in progress like everybody else. I do my best. Anyway, have a wonderful, wonderful day.